This orphan boy has the weirdest dream. When other kids want to become like their favorite superhero, this boy wishes to be a supervillain. But before that, he needs to prove himself as a loyal henchman. Lester is a 15-year-old boy who lives in an orphanage. Due to his obsession with comics and clumsy nature, he never got adopted by any family. Lester doesn't worry about having a family because he has different life goals. While reading comics, Lester notices how villains are always portrayed as ugly creatures with poor planning. Even if a villain proves himself as a mastermind in the start of the story, he will eventually get defeated by cheesy superheroes in colorful costumes. Lester believes that the villains also deserve to win. To prove his point, Lester decides to become a villain himself. He also has chosen a name. He is going to be called the Orphan. The most popular route to become a supervillain is by serving as a loyal henchman. This job has an age limit, so Lester waits for his 16th birthday. As soon as it arrives, Lester rushes to a villain's lair to become a henchman. The guards assume him as a newbie and let him inside the lair. It belongs to an overweight villain who wants to drown the whole country in his favorite cheese fondue. Surprisingly, the other henchmen don't suspect Lester at all, but a mechanic named Hank notices him. When Hank asks about his whereabouts, Lester shows a job advertisement he found. Hank feels sorry for the boy and explains that the advertisement is just a prank. You can't get hired as a henchman like other jobs. He advises Lester to go back to the city, find a boring job, and start a family like any other civilized citizen will do. Lester refuses to leave because he can't give up on his dream. Hearing this, Hank gets frustrated and explains that becoming a henchman is a nightmare. This is not a workplace, but a dangerous lair where the villain is planning to kill people with radioactive cheese. Before Lester can respond, the lair gets attacked by the superheroes team, called the Friendly Force 5. All the henchmen take their positions to protect their boss, so Lester also grabs a gun. One of the superheroes notices the boy and flies down to teach him a lesson. Luckily, Hank saves Lester and begs him to forget about his stupid dream and enjoy a peaceful life. After the superheroes leave, all the henchmen and staff members fly back to their secret location. It's the Union of Evil Henchmen that lies in the supervillain city on a secret island. Lester also sneaks into the henchman bus and arrives at the Union. He gets interviewed by an AI recruiter who tests Lester in different aspects. Unfortunately, Lester has no promising qualities and gets hired as a third-grade henchman. Meanwhile, Hank is called by his boss, Waxman, who doesn't seem happy with his performance. Waxman reminds Hank that he works for the bad guys. Instead of saving Lester, he should have guarded the villain. As a punishment, Hank is going to be Lester's mentor. Lester gets really happy to hear this and promises to be Hank's best apprentice. However, it's not going to be that easy. As soon as Lester steps in the streets, he gets mesmerized by tall buildings and high-level technology. Here lives all those masterminds behind destroying cities. At first, Lester gets happy to meet his favorite supervillains, but then he notices how the retired supervillains have to adopt boring jobs to earn a living. Their lives are more complicated than Lester thought. Suddenly, he sees New Edition comics and tries to steal them. But despite being filled with criminals, crime is not allowed in this city. To survive here, Lester needs to find a job as soon as possible. Hank takes him to the henchman job fair. There, he introduces Lester to his team that includes a gorgeous woman named Jane, two young guys, Stu and Yakov, and the eldest member, Old Doug, who lost his body in the last fight. Before Lester can talk to them, a loud announcement is made to attract the henchmen. It's the most notorious villain, the Baron Blackout. When no henchman shows interest in working with Baron, he offers them triple salary. Hearing this, all henchmen rush to register themselves. Hank's team members also want to join, but Hank clearly says they are not allowed to work with Baron. It's one of the survival rules Hank made to survive in this career as long as possible. Mostly henchmen don't survive more than a few months, so it's very important to choose the right job. Baron sends his most loyal henchman, Biff, to recruit new workers, but Biff is more interested in annoying Hank. He keeps making fun of Hank and his team, but Hank doesn't reply and walks away with Lester. After a while, they arrive at the Supervillain History Museum, where Lester will carry out his first job. He has to mop the floor. Lester doesn't like the job, but he is still happy as he can know more about the villain's history. Costumes and weapons of famous villains are kept here. Lester starts checking each of them one by one, but a covered piece grabs his attention. Hank stops him from messing around, but Lester still pulls away the sheet. It's the frozen body of a villain called the Bandit. The superheroes dropped a volcano on him and trapped him in a giant indestructible crystal. Lester immediately notices the glowing ball near Time Bandit and tells Hank that the ball is called Whatafyum. It's a magical crystal that grants your wishes when opened. The superheroes froze it because they were afraid of villains taking over the world using the Whatafyum. Hank doesn't think it's possible, so he advises Lester to focus on cleaning. Suddenly, a girl walks in and drops her reports. While helping her, Hank notices that she's the same scientist who worked for Baron Blackout along with him. The girl introduces herself as the museum curator, Jolene Zen, and walks away before Hank can ask any more questions. Hank always liked her, but never got a chance to make a move. Luckily, Jolene left her computer behind, and Hank rushes to give it back. Before leaving, he warns Lester to stay in his place, but Lester can't do that at all. He starts wandering in the whole museum and imagines being a legendary supervillain. Suddenly, he steps on the mop and slips down into a storage box that contains a Ubersuit prototype. Without a second thought, Lester tries on the helmet and unintentionally turns on the robotic suit. The rest of the pieces get on Lester by themselves and start shooting lasers and fires. The whole museum becomes a mess, but Lester has no idea how to control the Ubersuit. Hank finally returns and asks Lester what's happening, but before he can reply, the suit gets in the flying mood. Hank is afraid of getting blamed for the mess, so he cleverly sneaks out of the museum. Lester is flying uncontrollably around the country and causes trouble here and there. He even reaches space and takes a beloved zoo animal along with him. The public and the news reporters are expecting from the superheroes to handle these matters, but none of them want to work during their break. They just saved the world this morning and want to have some peaceful time to eat their lunch. Meanwhile, Hank returns to his apartment where he has opened a small bar to enjoy his free time. While making some beer, Hank wonders what he will do once his punishment ends and he can be a henchman again. He suddenly remembers about the Whatafyum, but then he reminds himself that Lester is just an idiot who speaks stupidity. Luckily, Hank got rid of him. However, as soon as Hank takes his name, Lester crashes into the apartment. Hank gets really angry and clearly says that he doesn't want to get involved in any of Lester's weird plans. Hearing this, Lester finally reveals that he didn't steal the suit and never meant to use it to become a villain. He is trapped and needs help. Hank eventually agrees to help and asks Lester to open his face shield. As he does that, Hank punches his face and knocks him down. Meanwhile, the notorious Baron Blackout is checking each of the new henchmen one by one. He orders them to stand in front of a laser gun and asks weird questions. No matter how the henchmen answer, Baron doesn't get satisfied and turns all of them into slimy zombies. Afterward, he asks Biff to get more henchmen, because they need an army to make their plan work. Later that night, Hank carries unconscious Lester to Jolene's house. After explaining the whole situation, Hank asks Jolene to help the boy without informing the authorities because they may not understand. Jolene ties down Lester on the table and tries to study the Ubersuit. It originally belongs to a villain named Endgame, who crashed into a mountain during his first attempt at wearing the suit. Suddenly, Lester wakes up and starts to panic again. The Ubersuit is emotionally responsive, so it can't be controlled if Lester is having anxiety. Jolene bravely grabs the boy and asks him to take deep breaths. Once the suit turns off, Jolene drags the table back in place and continues the study. She needs to scan it and run different tests to find a way to remove it. Realizing how critical the situation is, Hank tries to escape by making different excuses. Before he leaves, Jolene mentions that the Ubersuit is indestructible and can break through anything. Hearing this, Hank changes his plan and starts acting politely. He apologizes to Lester and offers to stay until everything gets fixed. Hank asks Jolene to bring some coffee, but as soon as she steps out of the lab, Hank tells Lester that they are going to fulfill their dreams. But first, they need to find a secret place to design their plan. Lester is an innocent boy who immediately trusts Hank and does as he says. The next morning, they reach a dump where Hank finally shares his story about his first day. He worked as a henchman for Baron Blackout, along with his team, while Jolene was a scientist there. Baron wanted to kill children, so Jolene refused to help him. Suddenly, the superheroes arrived, but Baron was ready to kill them too. Luckily, Hank risked his career and turned off Baron's deadly gun. His teammates helped in defeating Baron, but in the end, the superheroes took all the credit, and Hank was demoted to become a cleaner. He never got the chance to be a henchman again. However, he is ready to help Lester to become a supervillain. If Lester wishes for it too, then he needs to learn the use of Ubersuit. Hank keeps training the boy with patience, and in just a few days, Lester learns to control the attacks and the flying mode. The suit also acts like armor, so Lester doesn't get any injuries, even if he falls down a million times. Once the training ends, Hank invites all his friends to a bar and offers to pay for their drinks. Jane gets suspicious and asks Hank to tell them everything that happened. Hank begs his friends to stay calm because he needs their help. They have to take Lester to the museum to put the suit back in its place. Hank's friends fall for his lies and agree to help. They disguise themselves as robots and reach the museum. While they distract the guards, Hank and Lester sneak into the museum. Finally, Hank reveals his true intentions. He wants to use Lester's strength to break the crystal and get the powerful What-If-I-Am. It will fix all of their lives. Lester fully trusts Hank and starts shooting at the crystal. He tries to break it several times, but the power doesn't seem enough. Lester eventually gives up and apologizes to Hank, but Hank starts blaming his incompetence. He calls Lester a useless boy who can't even hold the mop straight. He got superpowers on a silver plate, but still can't use them properly. How can such a person become a real supervillain? Lester asks Hank to stop, but Hank keeps calling him with insulting titles. Lester gets really angry, and his emotions help him gain enough power to break the crystal. Hank grabs What-If-I-Am and apologizes to Lester for using a dirty trick. All that he said was intended to trigger Lester's powers. Before Lester can respond, the police surround them from all sides. Hank and Lester escape the museum, but Jolene sees them on the way and starts following them. They reach the dump, where other teammates are waiting for them. Hank finally tells the truth and shows the magic crystal to everyone, but they don't seem happy at all. Jolene reaches there too and explains that no one knows what the crystal actually is. But Hank is ready to take the risk. He wishes for himself and his team to get rid of the henchman job and let Lester become a real supervillain. Saying this, Hank breaks the crystal, but Lester destroys it before it hits the ground. Hank has no right to make decisions for others' lives just because he wants to. Everyone gets really angry and calls Hank a selfish and insensitive guy who not only deceived his friends, but also tried to mess up their lives. His teammates break all ties with Hank before leaving, and Jolene also doesn't want to see his face again. Hank returns home and starts grabbing important stuff to leave this city once and forever. Suddenly, his boss, Henchmen, arrives and arrests Hank for destroying the museum. Meanwhile, Jolene takes Lester back to her lab and tries lasers of different frequencies to break the suit. She also keeps talking about Hank and his bad deeds. She liked him at first, but he turned out to be the worst guy he ever met. Lester asks Jolene to calm down and give Hank another chance. He may not be as bad as they think. He is someone who saved Lester without knowing who he was. Hank made some mistakes, but he did everything because he felt lost and trapped. He's lonely, just like Lester is. This loneliness forced them to make some risky decisions. Jolene finally understands and starts thinking from Lester's point of view. The next day, Biff kidnaps Hank's teammates and presents them in front of Baron Blackout. The evil boss wants to test his shooting gun on them, but Biff begs him to spare a few henchmen because they need cleaners and cooks to survive. Baron agrees, and the teammates start working on Baron's ship. Meanwhile, Jolene has tried every possible solution, but nothing seems to break through the Ubersuit. Lester gets frustrated and decides to cut the armor by himself. He uses random tools, but of course none of them works on the armor. Poor Lester gets really sad and wonders how he's going to enjoy the rest of his life. Jolene feels sorry for him, but then she suddenly remembers that the suit works with emotions. If anger increases its power, then staying calm may shut it down. Jolene asks Lester to close his eyes and think about his happy place. Being an orphan and a weird boy, Lester never had a happy moment in his life. After thinking for a few minutes, he finally remembers the time when Hank appreciated him after the training. That was his happy place. The feeling of having a friend who is standing beside you. As Lester opens his eyes, he realizes that the suit has been removed by itself. Lester and Jolene start celebrating, but they get interrupted by a loud noise. It's Baron Blackout who is going to take over the world. To announce his dominance, he uses his zombie-making gun on a few citizens of the supervillain city. He orders all the other villains and henchmen to serve him. Otherwise, they all will die. Saying this, Baron leaves the island and heads to the capital city to get rid of the superheroes. Meanwhile, Hank escapes his boss and rushes towards his crew. Unfortunately, all of them are kidnapped except for the old Doug. Hank regrets his behavior and decides to rescue his friends by himself. Old Doug gets worried for him, so he rushes to inform Jolene and Lester. They must do something, because Baron is more powerful than ever. He even defeats all the superheroes single-handedly, and the Prime Minister is ready to accept his orders. Finally, there's a supervillain who is going to win the war. Suddenly, Hank appears in the sky in his flying car and shoots some missiles at Baron's ship. They barely caused any scratch, but it wasn't Hank's intentions anyway. He just wanted to trigger Baron. The plan works, and Baron sends a few missiles in return. Hank guides the missiles back towards the ship and breaks his car's windshield so the missiles can shoot right inside the ship. Hank asks Baron to let his friends go, but Baron clearly refuses. Instead, he points his gun towards Hank to turn him into a slimy zombie. Luckily, Lester reaches there in Ubersuit and stops the gun ray. He volunteers to handle the Baron alone and asks Hank to go and save his friends. They have already gotten into the escape pod, but Hank and Jolene stay behind to help Lester. Meanwhile, Lester gets brainwashed by Baron, who offers to train him to become a real supervillain. Lester falls for his tricks and gives the Ubersuit to Baron. Hank wonders why he did it, but Lester clearly says that he wants to fulfill his dream. He finally got the right mentor, and together with him, Lester will take over the world. Lester keeps admiring Baron's achievements, and it makes Baron more and more powerful. Once Baron gets to the peak of his strength, Lester starts recalling the insulting moments of Baron. He ends his speech by saying that bad guys never win. All of it was his plan to make Baron emotionally unstable. Once Baron gets really frustrated, the Ubersuit also loses its controls and blasts into pieces. Lester loses his chance to fulfill his dream, but in the form of a team, he has gained a loving family.